Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever heard someone claim they don't make them like they used to? Well, in this case, they're right, and thank goodness. Because if you tried riding a 1902 Humber Beeston 2¾ horsepower down your street today, you'd either be the coolest person on the block or the reason traffic's backed up all the way to Tuesday. It's the motorcycle equivalent of a handlebar mustache. Charming, oddly impractical, and historically powerful. And if your neighbor says he used to ride one to school, he's either lying or he's 140 years old. Before we plunge into a world of sloping engines, royal rides, and British engineering that predates sliced bread, do me a solid. Subscribe to Timmy Tiny Wheels. One click and you help keep this channel running smoother than a Longomar carburetor on a summer morning. It also funds my ongoing quest to understand why vintage spark plugs are more expensive than rent. Now, strap on your goggles and tighten your gaiters. We're going for a spin through 1900s Britain, where bicycle makers were turning into motorbike pioneers. Our story begins in England, where the esteemed bicycle manufacturer Humber & Co., founded by Thomas Humber in 1868, decided in 1902 it was time to bolt an engine onto a frame and see what happened. By then, bicycles were no longer the peak of speed or style, and motorized contraptions were the future. And like every overly ambitious startup today, they said, let's license someone else's tech and call it progress. Enter the duo of Joe Phelan and Richard Moore, mad geniuses behind Phelan & Moore, who developed an unusual engine sloper design. This little wonder replaced the bicycle's front down tube with the engine itself, mounted at a rakish approximately 40 degrees angle, like it was trying to be cool before motorcycles even knew what cool was. Their setup avoided infringing on Werner's pesky patent. Those Germans wanted all front-mounted engines for themselves, while also offering real perks: better frame rigidity, a lower center of gravity, and, importantly for guys like Prince Albert's of Monaco, a smoother ride between Monte Carlo and Paris. Humber, eyeing both the patent loophole and the growing market, grabbed the license and split their production. The cheaper, simpler Coventry Humber came out of the main factory. But the real gem, the Beaston line, was assembled at their Nottinghamshire facility and got the fancier French Longmar carburetor, premium trim, and the kind of marketing that said, you're not just riding a bike, you're riding a lifestyle. The Beaston models, especially the 2¾ horsepower version, became darlings of the early motorcycling crowd. Designed for the wealthy gentleman rider, they weren't mass-produced mudflingers. They were top-shelf machines made in limited numbers from 1902 to 1905. After that, Humber shifted focus to four wheels and let the Beaston fade into elegant obscurity. Now let's lift the goggles and take a good greasy look under the brass-trimmed hood of this Edwardian engineering feat. The Humber Beeston 2¾ horsepower was powered by a single-cylinder, four-stroke side-valve engine tilted forward like it had something to prove. Displacement hovered between 345–372 cc, and it pumped out approximately 2¾ horsepower. That might not sound like much, but remember, in 1903, that was enough to haul both you and your monocle up a muddy hill with royal dignity. The engine was mounted directly into the frame, acting as a structural element, a clever workaround that eliminated the need for a traditional down tube. The Beaston models used a French Longomar carburetor, because even in 1903, French carburetors had flair, with ignition handled by either a trembler coil or a magneto system. Transmission? You got three chains, one from the engine to the clutch, one from the clutch to the rear wheel, and a third one for pedal start, because kickstarters hadn't been invented yet, and nothing screams masculinity like pedaling a 74 kilograms machine uphill in tweed. A two-speed clutch was included, with a free engine system that let the motor idle while stationary. Fancy stuff, especially compared to rival bikes still using belt drives and prayers. Suspension up front was a Humber-designed anti-vibration fork with dual parallel tubes and a spring unit, while the rear was rigid because chiropractors needed job security too. Brakes were caliper-style, squeezing the rim like it owed you money. Spoked wheels came fitted with 26 to 28 inches. tires, and the whole setup stretched about 6 feet 10 inches, 2,100 millimeters long, 3 feet 8 inches, 1,120 millimeters tall, and a dainty 21 inches, 530 millimeters wide. Total weight? Around 163 pounds or 74 kilograms in proper metric. Top speed varied based on wind direction, road surface, and the size of your breakfast, but generally maxed out around 25 to 28 miles per hour, 45 kilometers per hour. Fuel economy was a respectable 4 to 5 liters per 100 kilometers. You could cruise all day and only stop for tea, or breakdowns, or both. What made it stand out? First, that sloping engineer's frame trick was pure ingenuity. Second, the Beaston's 2-speed clutch and pedal assist gave it climbing chops that turned heads at hill trials and made rivals weep into their leather gloves. And let's not forget, the Prince of Monaco used one. That's not a rumor, that's museum-documented fact. Design-wise, the Beaston looked like a bicycle that had been spending time with the wrong crowd, and we mean that as a compliment. With its swept handlebars, sprung leather saddle, and polished brass headlamp, it exuded Edwardian elegance. The frame design allowed for clean integration of the engine, tank, and components, with none of the do-it-yourself chaos you'd find in rival machines. More than just looks, though. The Beaston was built for comfort. Its anti-vibration fork helped soak up bumps from cobbled roads, and the pedal system allowed riders to launch the bike smoothly. Critical, since stalling mid-traffic could earn you a disapproving glare from a horse. Its market? High-end. In 1902, the Beaston 2¾ horsepower cost £65 sterling. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly £8,450 sterling. In today's money, or around $10,730, 9,890 euros. In the same era, the Coventry model sold for £55 sterling. You were paying for premium French parts, smoother engineering, and, let's be honest, a bit of bragging rights. And bragging they did. Beaston riders competed in hill climbs, endurance trials, like the Glasgow to London run, and photo shoots with royalty. This was not a bike for common folks with errands. This was for gentlemen who timed their rides between gin and tonics. Today, they're hen's teeth on wheels. Fewer than 10 Beaston 2¾ horsepower motorcycles are known to survive, and almost all are museum grade. At the Hershey 2023 auction, R.M. Sotheby's sold a beautifully restored 1903 example for $23,000. Bonhams let one go for £16,100 sterling back in 2010, approximately $26,000 at the time. Donington Auctions tried to move one in 2019 with a guide of $40,000 to $60,000 Australian dollars, but it didn't sell. And I think it's because nobody had the proper monocle. But let's give credit where credit is due. The Humber Beeston 2¾ horsepower was a machine ahead of its time. It merged bicycle agility with real engineering ambition, introduced frame-integrated engines before that was a thing, and delivered 2-speed, chain-driven performance when belts were still snapping like internet arguments. I believe it's one of the most dignified motorcycles ever made. Dignified enough that even Bob admits, if I had one, I'd only ride it in a cravat. And hey, don't forget to subscribe before your carburetor clogs with dust. Because the next story might just involve something weirder, wilder, or with more chains than a 1902 Humber.